Hello, my name is LoG, and today's going to be a solo walkthrough for a solo I recently put together for a patron. This is a top-tier patron who basically asked me to solo over Purple Rain by Prince. They wanted to see what I would personally do over a track or a chord progression like this, so that is what this video is going to be. You'll also see a breakdown of the chord progression and why it's very easy to play over, and then you'll also see a 4-part breakdown of the entire solo. All of the notes I'm playing, what I'm thinking about when I'm choosing them, how I'm choosing to feature the sounds of the chords, all that good stuff. So hopefully you'll be able to gather some of these ideas and apply them to your own playing. I'm also going to be uploading the backing track I made for this solo to YouTube so you can test stuff out over that track if you'd like. The video is very long, so if you want to use the YouTube chapters, which you can find in the video timeline, I would recommend you do that so you can navigate to the parts that you're most interested in. Of course, if you have any questions about any of the material, feel free to let me know in the comment section. Hope you enjoyed the video, and let's get to it. So before we begin, we need to talk about the most important thing you should always be thinking about when it comes to soloing over a section of music, and that is the chord progression, because the chords are going to determine what you sound like. The notes that you play will sound different depending on the chords behind you, so you must have those chords in mind when you are improvising or writing a solo or whatever. Now, this chord progression is very interesting because it contains what I like to call the autopiloting trifecta of chords. So first of all, what do I mean by autopiloting? Autopiloting is the term that I've used before that basically means the strategy of soloing that you use is just simply, what is the key of the song? I'm going to play the major pentatonic or minor pentatonic, if that's what you want to do, of that key, and that's it. I'm not going to think about the chords. I'm not going to worry about when they're changing. I'm not going to worry about the unique colors of those chords. I don't care about any of that. Just going to play the pentatonic of the key, and I'm good to go. Now, this is a fine strategy. It's a strategy that probably 50% or more of all guitar players use. It's kind of nice because it allows you to kind of play more freely. You don't necessarily have to think about what's going on. You can kind of just hop into the track and just start playing and have a good time. Nothing wrong with it. The problem is only being able to do this, because if you only autopilot, if you just think about the key you're in and run the pentatonic of that key, that will straight up not work with certain chord progressions. Right? There will be some chord progressions where you just cannot run the scale of the key and expect to sound smooth or lock in with the music at all times. It's just not going to happen for certain chord progressions. Not this one, though, because this one contains, like I mentioned, the autopiloting trifecta. So first we need to figure out what key are we in and what are the actual chords. So very simply, we are in the key of B flat. Now, first of all, the chords that are happening in the actual Purple Rain tune are kind of specific voicing. So for example, instead of playing B flat major, they play like B flat suspended. And there's some other little things going on in the track, but that's not super important. What we want to focus on is just the basic chord types, because that will determine the general sound that's happening in the solo. So again, what key? We're in the key of B flat. And the first chord of the tune, of the solo section, is B flat major. We will call this the 1 chord of the key because that is the chord built on the first note of the key of B flat, and that is a major chord, so B flat major. We will call this a 1 chord, okay? Next chord of the solo section is G minor. We will call this a 6 chord because it is the chord built on the 6th note of the key of B flat. How do I find that? I literally just walk up a B flat major scale until I get to G, which will be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th of that key. And 6 chords are minor, so we will be playing a G minor. This is also the relative minor of B flat major, by the way. In every single key, doesn't matter what major key you play, the 6th chord is always the relative minor of the 1 chord. Something important I'll talk about later. After that, we have a 5 chord. That would be F major, a major chord built on the 5 of the key. How do we find that? You simply look at the 1 of the key, B flat, walk up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's an F. 5 chords are major, so we play F major right there. And then the final chord is E flat. That would be the 4 chord, a major chord built on the 4th of the key. Simply find that by walking up the scale until you get to the 4th. B flat is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an E flat. So E flat is the 4 chord. So in total, we have 1 B flat major, 6 G minor, 5 F major, and then E flat, the 4 chord major. Okay, so those are the chords. Now, what is the autopiloting trifecta? It is a collection of 3 chords that are the most common chords when it comes to the autopiloting strategy, and that is the 1 chord, which we have, the first chord, the 6 chord, which is the second chord in the chord progression, G minor, and then the 4 chord, which is the last chord of the progression. So in this case, that would be B flat major, G minor, and E flat major, okay? This is what I call the autopiloting trifecta because these 3 chords, whenever you experience them in any tune you're playing, solo section, whatever, you can always just simply play the pentatonic scale of the key and you will be good to go. Okay. Now, there's many reasons why, and we're going to dive into them a little bit, but one very clear reason that you can kind of see right off the bat has to do with one single note, and that is the B flat, right? What significance does B flat have in this key? It's the root of the key. Not only is it the root of the key, it will be the root, the starting note of the pentatonic scale of the key. If we're in the key of B flat pentatonic is the pentatonic scale of that key. So B flat pentatonic, right? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. 1 of B flat, that's the pentatonic of the key. You can also look at that as the pentatonic of the 1 chord, right? B flat major. The root of all of that is B flat, right? If we look at the key of B flat, there are only 3 chords in the key that contain that note inside of the basic major or minor chords. And guess what those chords are? The 1 chord, B flat, the 4 chord, E flat, and the 6 chord, G minor, right? I'll show you what I mean. Remember, the note is B flat right here. That note is, of course, the root of B flat, right? We can see it right there in the chord for sure. That note is also inside the E flat major chord, the 4 chord. How do I know? I can see it in the power chord. Here's E flat major. Look at the power chord, right? That's a power chord. 1 and 5 of E flat. Look at that note. That's a B flat, the 5th of this chord. So that B flat is the root of the 1 chord, B flat, but it's also the 5th of the 4 chord. I can see it right there. Look at the fretboard. I'm using the fretboard to teach me this connection, right? And guess what chord this note is also in? G minor. I can hear it. It's the G string, right? What is that note? There it is, B flat. What is that note of this chord? That is the 3rd, or the flat 3rd in this case, because we are playing a minor chord, right? These 3 chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 6 chord, are the only chords in the entire key that contain the root of that pentatonic of the key, aka the root of the whole key. Those are the only 3 chords. No other chords in the key have that note in it. Now, why is this note significant? Because when you are playing B flat pentatonic, right, the pentatonic of the key, what is a note that you will often land on? B flat, right? You might look at that note as like a big note to kind of bend up to or land on. All that stuff. Why do we want to land on that note? Because it's the root of the scale. It has that finality to it, that powerful sound to it when we blast it, like that. And guess what? The 3 chords that contain that note are the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 6 chord. So if you want to play in a way that really features that B flat, the root of the key, those 3 chords will always work. So for example, if I just sing B flat and cycle back and forth between those chords, it's always going to sound good because that note is in all of those chords. B flat over the 1 chord, it's the root. Bum. Over the 4 chord, E flat, it's the 5th. Bum. Over G minor, the 6th chord, it's the flat 3. Bum. I'm just going to run through them randomly. Bum. Now I can take that exact same concept and instead of just singing the single B flat, the 1 of the key over those chords, I can play the entire B flat pentatonic over all 3 of those chords. So B flat pentatonic, we'll do it over the 1 chord. Sounds like this. Of course, it's going to work. It's the pentatonic of that chord. Now I'm going to play same pentatonic scale, but over the 6th chord, G minor. This is also going to work because G minor pentatonic is identical to B flat major pentatonic, which I'll talk about. Again, that sounds like this. But it will also work over E flat. The 4 chord sounds like this. This is a particularly interesting one because when you play B flat major pentatonic, the pentatonic of the key over the 4 chord, the pool of notes that you get would be this. Right? Which creates what? E flats 5, 6, 7, 2, 3. Right, which is a very interesting sound. We have the E flat major chords 6, 7, 2, and 3, giving you more like a pretty major 7 sound. And it also, notice, doesn't have the root E flat in it, which is kind of an interesting strategy. You're playing over the chord, not playing the root, and instead giving you more of like a pretty major 7 type sound, which is a very common sound to play on top of a 4 chord. It's actually what most people do because this is the strategy people use, and that just innately will yield the sound of major 7 on top of a 4 chord. So you see what I just did right there. Major pentatonic, I sang first the B flat single note over all the chords. Then I played B flat major pentatonic over all of those chords. And what were those chords? 1, 6, and 4. And I can play that in any order. So if you wanted to experiment with this, take those chords, 1, 4, and 6, play them in any order. 1, 4, 6. 6, 1, 4, 4, 6, 1, 6, 4, 1. It doesn't matter the order because you're always using from that same pool of chords, just simply in the key of B flat in this case, and you can always just simply autopilot the pentatonic of the key, okay? That will work for every key. We're just doing it here in B flat because that's the key of the solo section, key of the song, but this will work in every key, right? So if you want to experiment with this, pick a key, figure out what the 1, 4, and 6 chords are of that key, run the major pentatonic of the key, and it's always going to work. Now, you might say, well, can I run the minor pentatonic of the key, which would be what? If we are in the key of B flat, right? B flat major is the pentatonic of the key. The minor pentatonic of the key would be minor pentatonic on the relative minor of B flat, which would be G minor, the 6th chord, right? Now, what's the significance there? These 2 chords, the 1 chord and the 6th chord of every major key, are relative major and minor, and one of the hallmarks of relative major and minor is the fact that their pentatonic scales are made of identical notes. So if you look at B flat major pentatonic, B flat, C, D, F, G, and then look at G minor pentatonic, which is 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7 of G, that would be G, B flat, C, D, F. Those are literally the same notes, literally the same notes. Obviously, the numbering is different, right? G is the root of G minor pentatonic, but it's the 6th of B flat major pentatonic, right? So the actual function of the notes are different, but the pool of notes you're choosing from are identical, right? So you could do that. You could think G minor pentatonic the whole time, although what is a note that we like to really blast when we are playing minor pentatonic? Same thing, we like to play the root, right? You might want to go really blast this G right there, right? Now here's the thing, G of course sounds good, but is G in every chord? It actually is not. So this will sound perfect over G minor. Bum, it's the root of that. It'll sound perfect over the E flat, the 4 chord. Bum, it's the 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 of that, but it's not in B flat, the 1 chord. Bum. I'm singing this. It's the 6 of this chord. Not a bad note, obviously it's fine, but it's not going to lock in as perfectly as its relative major pentatonic would, B flat. So you could experiment with that. You could cycle back and forth, try out your minor sensibility over the 6 chord or major sensibility over the 1. But I will say major pentatonic on the 1 tends to work better for this sort of thing. So that's the general sound that you're getting in this, right? It's that autopiloting trifecta where you've got those 3 chords, the 1 chord, 4 chord, and 6 chord that you can just straight up run B flat major pentatonic. In this case, because we're in the key of B flat, you can just run that the whole time. Now, again, is that the best choice? Should you just do that all the time? I mean, you can, but it might be kind of nice to make sure you have access to the colors of each of those chords, because there's a lot of interesting sounds you can play over those, right? So you don't just say, hey, look, I can autopilot, I'm just going to do that and forget about anything else. Have that as an option, but also make sure that you're, getting comfortable with actually playing the sounds of the chords as they happen. So the other thing that's notable, there's another chord in here that I haven't talked about, and that's F, the 5 chord. The 5 chord is not necessarily an autopilotable chord for one very clear reason. It's actually the same reason that the 1, 4, and 6 are perfect for autopiloting. They all contain the root of the key, B flat in this case. Guess what note is not in the F major, the 5 chord of the key? B flat. It is not. Not only is it not in the key, not only is the B flat not in the F chord, what note is in the F chord? A. The 3rd of F, right, is the 7th of the whole key. If we're in the key of B flat, what's 7? There's my root. 7's always back a fret. So the reason why the 5 chord isn't as autopilotable is because that note that we really want to blast, because it's comfortable to play, it sounds good, that note will clash if you play that note during the F major, the 5 chord of the key. I'm going to sing the note, right? It's going to sound perfect over the 1 chord, bum, perfect over the 4, bum, perfect over the 6, bum, but over the 5 chord, check it out, bum. You hear that? I'm singing this while the chord is playing that. So because of that, your ears are going to say, hey, over this chord, that note that has been safe this whole time is now kind of not, so maybe you should do something else. Your ear is probably going to tell you, do something like that, right? Slide back and land on that A, because that A is actually happening in the chord. So that's what I mean. It's a chord that is not as autopilot friendly, because you kind of have to make some changes to lock in with that chord. That, brainless note that you've been playing this whole time, that root of the key doesn't gel as well over that chord. Another example of a chord that's even less autopilot friendly is the 3 chord of the key. So if we're in the key of B flat, right? 1, 2, 3, I go to the 3, and 3 chords are generally minor, so we play minor. Same thing, I'm gonna sing that B flat on top of this chord. Watch that. Again, perfect over the 1 chord, bum, over the 4, bum, over the 6, bum, over the 3, bum. It's pretty tense. Why? Again, because that 3 chord has what note? A. The same A that the 5 chord had, right? Bum. So if I sing B flat on top of D minor, bum, it kind of gives this sound, which again, I don't want to say that's a bad thing. It might be awesome. It might be exactly what you want. It's actually, that type of chord is happening, I think, in a Radiohead tune. I think it's off of Amnesiac. I can't remember if that's exactly what it is. It's something like that. Regardless, it's a clashing sound, right? There's nothing wrong with clashing. Clashing can sometimes be really cool, but it can be a little awkward if you're not planning on it clashing and all of a sudden you blast a B flat thinking it's going to be super smooth and you're not paying attention to what you're doing and you do that on top of a D minor and it sounds bum like that. So you need to, again, clashing isn't bad. You just need to be aware when it's going to happen. And that's the biggest problem with autopiloting. You're not necessarily aware of the notes you're choosing and how they're functioning over the chord at that moment. And that's why there are many solo sections like backing tracks and whatnot on YouTube that don't play 3 chords, because you kind of have to know when that 3 chord is happening, you kind of have to know what to do over that chord, how to shift, because the autopiloting strategy doesn't work over that chord. So that's always something to think about when it comes to noticing the chords that you're playing. You have to be aware of these things. And again, because sometimes autopiloting works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So this track has an F major 5 chord, which is a chord that you kind of have to play when it happens. You can't just continue to autopilot B flat major the whole time, the major pentatonic of the key. Now, you kind of can do that, and there's some ways to work around it, and you'll see me kind of mess around with some stuff. When that chord happens, I will probably end up playing the chord, and you'll see me do that. But it's kind of up to you. Keep your ear open, and your ear will tell you, hey, this autopiloting strategy you've been using kind of doesn't really work for this chord, and when it happens, you'll modify, right? Now, there's one more little thing that's very interesting about this chord is a modification that people make to this chord to make it an autopilotable chord. And it's very simple, and you've probably heard it before. I can guarantee you've heard it before, and that's this. So again, we're in the key of B flat. Again, this works for every key. I'm just doing it in B flat because that's the key of the solo section. So B flat's 1, perfectly autopilotable. 6, G minor, perfectly autopilotable. A E flat 4 chord, also perfect. But instead of playing the normal 5 chord, where we have that pesky A natural, which prevents us from blasting our B flat that we like to play this whole time because we're just playing B flat major pentatonic as we autopilot our way through the chord progression, right? Instead of playing the F with an A, you get rid of the A and play the B flat. Play the note that we want to play. Play the note that we've been playing this whole time because it's safe. What does that turn the F chord into? We're not playing F major anymore. We're playing F sus4. Right? This sort of sound. What does that mean? What does sus4 mean? A standard F major chord is what? 1, 3, 5 of F. F, A, C. It's a little at 1, 3, 5 shape, right? This is always 1, 3, 5 no matter where you play it. F, A, and C. What we are doing is we're taking the A, the normal third of the chord, and replacing it with B flat. But what did we just do interval or number-wise? We just took the third of this chord, F, A, C, the third, and replaced it with the note up 1 fret. What note is always up 1 fret from a third? A 4th. So now instead of 1, 3, 5, normal major triad, it's 1, 4, 5. Which is the sound of what is called a suspended 4 chord. Suspended just simply means a chord that does not have a third, and you instead have either of the numbers next to the third. So what numbers are next to a third? The 2 or the 4. So that's where you get, if I play major, F major, sus2 would be this, 1, 2, 5 instead of 1, 3, 5. And then sus4 would be 1, 4, 5 instead of 1, 3, 5. Right? That is the sound of suspended. And again, when we play a 5 chord and play suspended instead of playing major, we have just turned the chord into an autopilot friendly chord. Because now that B flat, that safe note, root of the key that we want to land on all the time, is now a chord tone. It's now in the chord right there, right? That is not explicitly, it's definitely not happening in my backing track. It's not explicitly happening in the actual song, but it's sort of being implied. You'll hear him go like, so he kind of plays B flat a lot, even during the F major, right? And the voicings are not super obvious, like major, minor all the time. They're, again, kind of slightly vague because they're playing suspended voicings and all this stuff. So that's sort of happening in there. But in general, this move of playing a collection of chords, 1, 4, 5, 6, in any order you want, but strategically playing a sus4 chord during the 5 chord is an extremely common strategy. And in fact, it's a very common strategy in a lot of modern contemporary Christian music, a lot of contemporary praise and worship music. For one reason, it creates this like droning effect because that B flat, the root of the key, and again, we're doing this in B flat, but this will work for any key. The 1 of the key, I should say, is constantly happening in every chord that you play, right? If I just sing 1 of the key, B flat in this case, over all of those chords, 1, 4, suspended 5 chord, and then 6, it's always happening. Bum. just randomly ran through those chords, always saying B flat. The note I was humming the entire time was always B flat, right? You've probably heard this sort of thing before, and it's perfect for that modern praise and worship because that stuff like isn't really music. I mean, it is. Like, obviously, there's like lyrics and drum parts. It's music, but it's not being performed in the context of like, here's this song we're going to play. It's being performed to almost put the audience in like a meditative state, in like a trance-like state. And that is easily done when you have this like drone always going on. Like if you listen to meditation music, it often is very drony. It's like single pitch that's just kind of happening with very subtle movement going on underneath. That's what you'll hear with this sort of thing. The chords are changing, but the general sound is kind of not. It's like this constant root of the key ringing all the time while you have like the bass line changing and some other very basic notes, but that single B flat, the root of the key always happening, creates this droning effect, which is what a lot of those situations want. They want to put their viewers in this like meditative trance state. And if you start throwing in a bunch of different harmony, like a bunch of like wildly, different whatever chords in the situation, you might yank them out of that trance state that they're in and that you want them to be in, right? For the purpose of the church service or whatever. And this is a fantastic way to do that. It also happens to be a fantastic strategy when it comes to autopiloting guitar solos, because you can just make that one little modification, right? Your normal autopiloting trifecta, 1 chord, 4 chord, 6 chord of the key. And then when you play the 5 chord, don't play major, play suspended, something like this. And now you can autopilot over all 4 of those chords in any order. Doesn't matter the order. I mean, I'm starting on 1 right here because that's what Purple Rain is. But start on 6, right? Play 6. Or play the right key. 6, right? 5 suspended. 4. Don't even play 1. Just play 6, 5, 4. That'll give you like a more minor feeling thing. And if you think this is only for like chill ambient music or pop, it's not. You can probably hear the same sort of move, maybe not like a suspended chord on the 5, but the same sort of move is used all the time in like metal. You hear like 6. You hear that all the time. That's the same thing. It's the same thing as what we're talking about, just being executed in a heavier, more aggressive way. But those movements are the same thing. And people love them because they are very autopilot friendly. So with all that in mind, let's get into what I'm doing during the solo, because I am doing a little bit of a mixture of some autopilot stuff while also definitely targeting chord tones. All right, so let's get started with this first section. I'm going to show you all the notes I'm playing, what I'm thinking about, and how they function over the chords that are happening. A little bit of autopiloting going on here and there, but actually in this first moment, I'm really kind of thinking about the literal chords and using some strategies to get some sounds that I personally enjoy. So the first little passage sounds like this. Now, what I'm doing here is actually one of the main topics that I'm currently talking about on the Patreon, and that's using small chord shapes in your lead. That's definitely kind of what I'm thinking about right here. And I'm actually thinking about the first 2 chords of the progression, which, as we just talked about, are B flat, 1, and then G minor, the 6. That's actually kind of what I'm thinking about. The first lick, I actually originally was just thinking this. Right? So this is F and then D. And what I'm actually thinking about is this chord right here. Right? That's just B flat major 5, 1, 3. So you can kind of think about it from this larger bar chord. But I'm just thinking about this right here and highlighting the notes as little, pinpoints or little mile markers for my lead. So I'm basically just doing this 5 and 3. And I call these shapes outer string shapes. That's what I've been going through on the Patreon, where you're basically taking these 3 string chord shapes, these little inversions, and just playing the outer strings. So for example, if I play B flat right here, and then B flat right here, and then B flat right here, but only played the outer strings of those 3, so I'm just playing the D and B strings, that would be 5th and 3rd, root and 5th, and then 3rd and root. gives you a nice kind of color. The notes kind of stand out a little bit better because you're not playing all three, and there's like a big gap between them, usually a sixth, sometimes a fifth, like this, and it sounds pretty cool. So that's on what I'm thinking about right here. And I'm not playing it like that because I wanted a slide. So it's the same notes, but instead of playing the F here, I'm just playing this right there. So this interval distance is the same exact thing as this. I just wanted this little slide out of it, so. And then I kind of continue with this idea. That's the next thing, next thing I do, exactly the same thing. I'm just hammering on a little C to D, just like that. And then I do this, horrible fingering. Let me do that again. There we go. And that's another small chord shape I'm thinking about, still B flat. Here's B flat right here. That's the one I originally did. Now I'm using this shape right here. This is a little 1-3-5 shape on B flat. It's literally the same as this, just on the top three strings in this higher octave, 1, 3, 5. And my little melody, again, is based on an outer string shape. So I know this is the full chord shape, 1, 3, 5, but I'm just not playing the 3 in the middle, just playing 1 and 5. And I get into it by playing an extra note. That's just a little 6 and then 5, little note of the pentatonic, which I can definitely play. Right, one of the big topics on the Patron in regards to this is always having these chord shapes, but then simultaneously knowing all of the additional notes that you can add into the mix, which I'm actually doing quite a bit in this solo, so that's a huge topic for the building chord series on the Patron, right, which you'll see. So let me do that one more time. Right, very simple. Then I continue the melody. Right here, notice my little chord shape now is kind of different. Still kind of getting this outer string chord type thing, but the chord shape I'm actually thinking about now is this, which is G minor, 1 flat 3 5. That chord is not happening yet in the tune. It's the next chord. We haven't hit it yet, but it is about to happen. So I'm kind of implying it earlier, I guess, than it happens. So I'm really going like this, right? So you can think G, that's the root, my hypothetical root, to flat 6, E flat, and then 5. But instead of playing it like this, I'm playing it like this, because I wanted, again, a slide up to that same note. This is literally the same as this, right? If you wanted to hold them all together, you'd do it like this, right? So the whole thing so far. And then I come down and finish with another small chord shape. Now, this moment, we're definitely on G minor, so I'm absolutely thinking a G minor chord right here. This is, again, another small chord shape. This is 5 in the bass, 5th, root, and then flat 3. And I'm, again, only playing the outer strings, right? So I know this full chord shape is here. That's actually what I'm visualizing, G minor, 5th, root, flat 3rd, but I'm not playing the root, the middle note, just playing the outer strings, 5th and flat 3rd on the D and B strings. Gives you this kind of, very colorful, this kind of, almost kind of counter melody type thing. It feels like you can hear like a top melody and a lower melody because there's only 2 notes happening and there's a big distance between them, so the ear can kind of pick them out a little bit easier. So I like that sound quite a bit, that whole thing. I think I might be bending that note now that I think about it. Same exact thing though. Then I'm definitely bona fide on G minor right now, and I continue playing G minor. Well, I take that back. The chord is G minor, but I'm actually playing something a little bit different right there. I'm briefly pretending this chord, right? So it's what I call a pretend chord. It's basically other people call these like substitutions or whatever. But I'm just playing a chord or thinking about a chord in my lead when it's actually something else. So the chord right here is definitely G minor, but I'm actually thinking F major. Okay, so together that gives you this sort of sound. If I play a little bit of G minor plus the entirety of F major, sounds like that, right? When you do that, you're basically playing G minor as the actual chord, but when you play F on top of it, you're playing G's in whatever order, 4th, flat 7, and 2nd. In particular, the 2nd. That's what I really wanted right here. That's my little lick that I'm doing because I want this sound. This is the sound of G minor, the 6th chord, just 1, 3, 5, flat 3 because we're playing minor, and I've got the 2 on top. Very desirable sound. A lot of people really like this. So that's what I'm getting in that lead moment right there. Right? And kind of hitting this little C down here. Again, pulling these notes from a little F major chord, outer strings. Again. So from the beginning. Now right here, I'm almost kind of playing. I'm kind of thinking maybe a little bit of B flat major pentatonic, which of course is also G minor pentatonic. I'm kind of thinking about that, kind of ending on this F right here, almost thinking about it as like the 5th of B flat. Just a little melody that sounds cool in my opinion. Then, after that little run on the G string, which is entirely B flat major pentatonic, by the way, little autopiloting right here. But I am ending on C right there. Notice if I was a true autopiloter, I might end on D or end on B flat. Why am I not ending on B flat and I'm ending on C? Because the chord right here is definitely F major, the 5 chord, right? And C is the 5th of that chord, right? It's right there. It's in the chord. So if I want to bring out the sound of that 5 chord of F major, I'm going to land on this note, and that's why I'm doing that right there. And which you'll hear as I run over the chord changes here in just a second. So then I just mess around with this note, right? Some like a little slidey, obnoxious vibrato right there, right? Then I start to play a little bit of this, which is a cool sound, just moving through some combinations of notes that give me notes that are, half step, whole step apart, which sounds pretty cool. And I'm also getting a little bit of the F dominant flavor right here. The chord is definitely F, and I'm playing this. So what are those notes? These 2 notes, that's E flat F. Of F major, that's flat 7 and 1. You can almost just visualize this standard like F dominant chord right here. That's kind of what I'm seeing when I do this. I see this little 3 flat 7 1 chord of F. So bringing about that little dominant flavor, right? Because I know what's happening. I know I can do that. I'm getting almost this chord. Pretty cool way to play F dominant. 1 3 6 flat 7. Kind of a cool sound, right? A little bit of unison bend right here. This feels a lot like B flat pentatonic, because that's definitely a unison bend you would play for B flat. So I'm just doing it right there because it kind of is the natural culmination of my melody. And then I end right here. Okay, so first of all, right when I play this note, the chord that is happening, we're off of F now, even though that note is F. We're now on to E flat. So this is the last chord of the first cycle of the progression, E flat, the 4 chord. Notice the note I'm starting on. I'm starting on F. So right off the bat, you hear this, like an E flat kind of suspended flavor. So that's kind of an interesting flavor, something I like to use. But also, I'm getting into another tactic that is similar to what I did earlier that is also really cool, especially over the 4 chord. I mean, the 4 chord, let's just be honest, is like the easiest chord of all time to play over, because basically anything in the key sounds cool over this chord just because of the structure of the notes and how they interact with this chord. But I'm playing this figure. So I'm not holding the notes together in my solo, but I am right now to kind of show you what the final figure is in this lick. So I'm playing F, G, A, B flat, F, and then C, which kind of gives me this shape. What is this? This is an F major triad. A, C, F, with the 3rd in the bass, right? 3, 5, 1 of F major. What's the chord happening right here, though? It's E flat, the 4 chord. This tactic, let's just go over what it is. The 4 chord is actually happening. I, as the soloist, am thinking a 5 chord, right? I'm pretending it's a 5 chord. That's why I call these pretend chords. The chord is E flat. I am thinking and hearing in my mind F major. What happens when you do that? If the chord is actually E flat and you play F major on top, sounds like this, or like this, right? What would these notes be? If E flat is the root, what would just a plain F triad be? If I played like a little F chord right here, 5th, root, 3rd of F is what of E flat? That would be 6, 2, very importantly, sharp 4. That's the color note of a 4 chord, right? If you look at any major key, you go to the 4 chord, that chord will always have a sharp 4, and that is this sound. One of the best ways to get that sound is straight up have someone in the music play a 4 chord and have someone else play a 5 chord, like a higher voiced 5 chord, and that will give you this. I'm sure we've all heard this. Right, we've all heard that before. That's one of the most common sounds and most common ways to achieve that sound of the 4 chord. And I'm doing that in my lead. Right, getting that sound on top of the E flat. It's a really, really cool sound. So, and then I just continue with another sort of kind of loose time figure, which I kind of like. This almost feels like I'm playing maybe a little bit of E flat. Right, I use this figure actually a lot later on, and this is the root of the chord 1, 2, 7, which I kind of like. It's nice. So you could look at that as like a little bit of E flat major 7, which is kind of common over the 4 chord. And then I continue with actually literally playing E flat major. That's still the chord that's going on, the 4 chord. I play this. So that's just, if you notice, me walking up to E flat, and I'm literally again using a small chord shape 1, 3, 5. That's an E flat triad right there, right? ending on 2 on top because I like that sound. Kind of getting that like Hendrixy sort of sound. And I can't remember if I bend right there, but I end on this note. And why would I end on D? Because the chord has now changed. We've restarted the progression to what chord? The 1 chord, B flat, and that note is the 3rd of the chord, right? So my ears are telling me that, and my brain is telling me that as well, so I know I can slide up, bend up. I can't remember which one I did. So if I just play that entire solo kind of free time, you can hear it with the chords in the background. Sounds like this. Pretty straightforward. So with all that in mind, let's get on to the next section where there's going to be some more kind of pattern stuff and a little bit more autopiloting. All right, so next run of the progression, we just finished the last part with this little E flat lick. And we start right here on the same, pretty much the same starting note we did in the first part of the video, except now we start with a first kind of notey lick, and it sounds like this. So this is really kind of autopilot-y, B flat major pentatonic. You can more think about it as G minor, I suppose, because I am playing quite a bit of G in the low register, especially to match the chord when it happens. But that first lick is this, right? So it's very simple. I'm just kind of walking up 1, 2, 3, B flat, flattening my pinky and grabbing the G on top. I'm also grabbing that note with my finger, I think. Yeah, I'm sure that's what I'm doing. And then pulling off and playing G below. So I'm basically walking up to G, then walking down to G. Like that. It's really simple. Then I do this. That's kind of a similar lick where I have like a quick little hammer-on of 3 notes, except I'm doubling the B flats. I originally was doing F, G, A, B flat and getting that, but I think when I was practicing this, I made a mistake and I doubled the B flat. I just went 1 fret too far, and I kind of liked it, so I think that's what I ended up choosing. Right? Boom, boom, kind of a fun rhythm. So, trying to do some palm mutes right there. Right, and now that I play this is definitely more G minor pentatonic instead of B flat major pentatonic. So the pentatonic of the relative minor of the key, that's definitely what it feels like I'm playing right here. I mean, that's all just really simple. Ending on the B flat, again, this is an autopilot tactic. Notice the note I happen to be landing on in these licks a lot, that B flat, right? That's what autopiloting is, when you can land on the root of the key and have it sound good. And it definitely sounds good at this moment. All of that stuff has taken me through the 1 chord and the 6 chord, right? So that's kind of from the very beginning of that, starts on B flat, and now at this moment, I'm definitely on the G minor. And then I continue like this. That's a lot of the same notes. Again, more just B flat major pentatonic, G minor pentatonic. I'm actually literally playing a G minor 7 chord right here. I call these, like, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, trampoline licks, where there are little figures that, just a couple notes that kind of boost you into this main note that you're shooting for. I really like to use these small chord shapes, these 1, flat 3, flat 7 chord shapes for these, because I like the distance. It sounds really nice. If you've ever heard, like, For the Love of God by Steve Vai, that's the shape that he's using. 1, flat 3, and then flat 7. It's not that in the context of the song, I think, because he's playing E minor, that'll be 5, flat 7, 4, 5. I'm pretty sure. In this situation, that's side note. In this situation, I'm just playing, literally thinking G minor, playing this little shape right there. Right? So I'm walking up. I like this melody. Very, very simple. Nothing really to talk about there. It's just straight up like B flat major, G minor pentatonic. So from the beginning, a little slower. One more time. That pull-off is always tricky because my pinky is flat, because I'm flattening my pinky to grab the G right there. Pulling off on a flat finger is really annoying, but I'm getting it so far. Right. Walk down, and I'm strategically targeting this note. Bam. bam, this C right there. So the chord at this moment, we've gone through the first kind of handful chords of the progression. We are now on the 5 chord, so that would be the F major chord, right? The second half of the progression. And I start a lick that I really like. It's a pattern that I've played before. I haven't played it in a while, but for some reason playing over this track just like sparked my memory of this passage, and I really like it. And it's a pattern that takes you all the way up, just moving through the key. Again, I'm not necessarily thinking about the chord I'm on. It's just a pattern that I just want to play start to finish, moving through the key. But it's a pattern that does some interesting things. So the pattern is basically this. You play a note, starting on this C, by the way, which works because that's the 5th of F, the chord that's happening at that moment. C, and I do this. You play a note, drop down a 4th, go back, and then walk up 2 notes in the key. So ba-do-da-dum-bum. Then when you get to that higher note, the kind of 3rd note in the pattern, 1, 2, 3, you repeat. So you play this note, drop down a 4th, go up, back to the same note you were just on, up 2 more, drop down a 4th. You get the idea. And what you basically are doing is implying chords every time you do that. That's how I hear it. So for example, this first one, play that better. Excuse me. That's C, G, C, D, E flat. To me, that sounds like C minor, right? 1, 5, 1, 2, flat 3 of C minor, right? And then the next one is 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of E flat major, and then 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of G minor. So every time I kind of hit the next point in this pattern, I'm kind of implying a different chord every time. So if I just play the whole pattern slow, you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. And then I terminate right there, and that takes us to the next chord. So it kind of, if I kind of sing the lick on top of the implied chords that I'm hearing, it would be like ba-do-da-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Let's see. Ba-dum, 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 da-dum, ba-dum, da-dum, ba-dum. And so I'm basically kind of hitting all of the chords of the key, all moving thirds apart. So it feels like 2 of the key, to the 4 of the key, ba-do-da-dum, 6, 1, and then 3, ba-do-da-dum, 5, ba-do-da-dum, 7, ba-do-da. So I'm hitting every chord. My singing's terrible, I apologize. I'm hitting every chord with this little grouping, right? And you can kind of see the notes that are in play if you look at it like that. This is 1, 5, 1, 2, flat 3 of C minor, and then that flat 3 becomes 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of E flat, right? And then it becomes 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of G minor, 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of B flat, and then it becomes 1, 5, 1, 2, 3 of D minor. But notice 1, 5, 1, that's not 2, that's flat 2, which makes sense because this chord corresponds to D minor. And what is D minor in the key? The 3 chord. 3 chords have flat 2s. That's why that note is happening right there. Right? And I kind of break the pattern at the end because I want to terminate on this note. This D right here, because at that moment, right when I hit this note, the chord has now changed, and that chord, that whole run was all on F major, the 5 chord. The moment I hit this note, now we're on the 4 chord, right? And that is the 7 of the 4 chord, kind of creating major 7 sound, which is kind of cool. And I'll recap all of that here in a second when I play over some simple chords so you can hear everything in context. After I get this, I kind of naturally walk up in the way your ear probably wants to hear, right? Little bends. And then I terminate on that final B flat, but I don't necessarily just play B flat. I play this figure right here, which sounds like this. So what is that? This, you can probably tell, is a sound that is out of the key. And what I'm playing here is a minor 4 chord. So the chord going on at this moment is a 4 chord, E flat. I'm doing this in my lead. I'm kind of implying, just like pretty stuff, you know, moving up through the key, implying the notes of the 4 chord a little bit, right? Ending on this note, that'll be its sharp 4, giving you this kind of sound. But then I start to play literally E flat minor while the chord is E flat major. Why would I do that? Because I'm evoking the sound of a minor 4. What is the sound of a minor 4? A transitional sound that very often takes you to 1 or 6. The major or minor sound of the key, right? If I do that, E flat major, turn it up a little bit, E flat major, E flat minor, to B flat major 1. I'm sure you've heard that many times. Or I can go E flat major, 4 chord, minor 4, right, 2, 6. Also is pretty satisfying, especially if you put the flat 7 on top so that little chromatic figure can continue. I guarantee you've heard this before. If you've ever heard, let's see, what would it be? Wake me up when September ends. Right? That's probably the most, it's not in that key. I think they're doing it in the key of G, but I'm doing it here in this key. That's a great example of a minor 4. Very popular movement. And because I know that sound, I know that chord sound exists, and I know that in the progression, we're about to move to 1, my ear is just saying, hey, play minor 4. And that's all I'm doing. I'm playing a minor 4. In particular, minor 6, which, let me make that a little bit clearer. It's E flat minor, so the minor 4 of the key, but the voicing I'm using is a minor chord with a 6, hence minor 6. It sounds like this. Minor 4 as a location in the key, again, it's out of the key, but very common transition. One of the most common, side note, one of the most common areas to ever hear melodic minor. Move my fret wrap. So yeah, that's a very common sound. I'm sort of implying that, not 100%, but that's what I'm thinking about right here. Very common tactic. You can also look at this as another chord, C minor 7 flat 5, because that chord is verbatim the same thing as E flat minor 6. They're inversions of each other. So you can think about it like that. Getting into the weeds a little bit, you can, if you have questions about it, let me know in the comment section if you want. And that takes me to the next section. So I'll just kind of recap all of that slowly, and we'll hear it over the chords. You can see what everything sounds like. So coming from this D, we have our fast stuff. We have our pattern. Really nice pattern. Then we continue. Now, again, that minor 4 is not happening, so it's going to be kind of strong, and that's okay. I personally like those sounds. So yeah, that's why I'm doing it. Let's get on to the next section. All right, so the previous section, we ended with that little minor 4 lick, even though there was no minor 4 going on in the backing track. I played it anyway in the lead because it sounds cool. Now, after this bend right here, why would I be bending that note, by the way? I'm bending to F, which is the 5th of the B flat chord, the chord that's happening at that moment. And then I start doing this. So what is all this? This is one of the most common sounds. Many people are already doing this. I am just simply playing minor pentatonic on top of a major chord. So the chord is B flat right now, just the one chord, first chord of the cycle of chords in the progression, right? And I'm playing B flat minor pentatonic. After that bend, I do this. That's my root. I'm playing minor pentatonic, flat 3, 4, flat 3, 1, right? That's just, I don't need to explain any of that. That's minor pentatonic, super, super normal sound. And why am I doing that? It's because it's one of the easiest ways to immediately evoke this like kind of bluesy sort of nastiness. People have done this for 100 years. It's a major chord, but you play minor pentatonic on top of it. We can thank the blues genre for training our ears to want this sound, or at least recognize the sound when it happens. Again, it gives it that kind of bluesy, kind of nasty feel when you do that, and it fit perfectly over the solo. And I'm sure a lot of people, if they were soloing over this song, they would use this as a tactic. Very, very common. That's pretty much what I'm doing right there. But then I start doing something else. So the sound is B flat major, right? If you play B flat minor pentatonic, again, that gives you kind of this nasty sound. But there's this other sound that's kind of in the middle that is still a little nasty, but not as nasty as playing straight up minor pentatonic. And let's go over what that is. So first of all, why is minor pentatonic kind of giving you this sort of nasty sound? So the chord is B flat major, right? When you play minor pentatonic on top of that, what would those notes be? For B flat, it'd be 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. It's minor pentatonic on B flat, right? An out of key sound, but we're doing it to achieve this nasty kind of blues effect. How many of those notes are actually out of the key? It's really just 2 notes, right? The first note of minor pentatonic is B flat, definitely in the key. So is the 4, E flat, and the 5, F. It's just the other 2 notes, the flat 3, D flat, not in the key, and A flat, the flat 7, also not in the key. Those are the only two notes that are out. So when you play them, they give you that kind of nastiness, right? But they also kind of have a place to go. So when you hear them, it doesn't really sound like some random out of key notes, right? When we play flat 3, so if this is the root B flat, if I play flat 3, oftentimes our ears are already familiar with sounds that use that. So when we hear that, yes, this note is out of the key, but when we hear it, it still sounds kind of familiar because we're so used to that sound anyway. And same thing with the flat 7. If I play flat 7 and I just hammer onto 1, it sounds relatively normal, even though it's not in the key. To our ears, we hear these sounds as, oh, that's that sound before. I've heard that, right? I can even sing that on top of the chord, right? Boom, bum, bum, bum. Still sounds relatively normal. Or flat 7. Boom, bum, bum, bum. Still sounds fine, even though those two notes are, again, out of the key. A tactic you can pretty much always use. Just be aware that, it will give you a slightly nasty sound when you do it. Now, the other sound that I'm playing, I kind of do at the very tail end of that. What is that right there? Right, just look at these. This little slide, and then this little slide. What I'm doing here is I'm playing not B flat major or B flat minor. I'm playing B flat dominant, which is what? This sound. A major sound with a flat 7, right? So I'd kind of look at that as the sound of the 5 chord. I'm actually going to be playing this sound again over the next chord because the next chord is actually the 5 chord of the key, so you'll hear me do it there. But why would I do this? Because it still has a little bit of that nastiness that minor pentatonic has when you play it on top of just the straight up major chord, but not as much. Why? Because there's really only one note different. The sound of dominant 7th or major with a flat 7, what is that sound? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, right? What was minor pentatonic before? It was 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. So the difference between these two sounds, as far as the nastiness, the out of key notes goes, it's just one note. Minor pentatonic had the D flat and the A flat, the flat 3 and the flat 7. But dominant just has the A flat, the flat 7. It does not have that D flat anymore. It has the D natural because we're playing major like this. So it's kind of like this midway point. So if you want this sound and you want like a hard, kind of nastier, bluesy version, that's minor pentatonic. But if you want this like midway point, not as nasty, you start playing dominant. 1, 3, normal 3, 5, flat 7. Notice that flat 7, still in the same location as it was for pentatonic, just back 2 frets from your root. There's your root, go back 2 frets, right? And of course, I'm also doing the classic technique of, what is that? That's me targeting the normal 3 of B flat, but sliding into it from the flat 3. So it still kind of has that minor pentatonic flavor because I am still playing flat 3. I'm just not sitting on it. I'm not doing that. I'm hitting it, sliding away from it, flat 7 up to 1. And then the next lick I play after that, that's about as, vanilla of a dominant 7th lick you could possibly play. It just worked really well melodically right here. And what am I doing? That's B7, right? B flat, dominant 7. Hopefully I haven't been saying B this whole time. B flat is the chord. Let's make sure I'm saying that right. We're sliding up to its flat 7. Bum, bum, bum. That's flat 7, 6, 5, 4 of B flat. And our little cute hammer on from flat 3 into 3. Insanely common tactic. So that's what I'm doing for that whole beginning sound. It's just this mixture of these kind of nastier blues flavors, these more like rock blues flavors. And I'm getting that by just thinking of what's the normal chord, right? B flat. Instead of playing B flat, I'm playing B flat minor pentatonic for ultra strong blues flavor, and then B flat dominant for that kind of midway point, sort of strong, but not as strong. Because we now have that normal third, like the chord normally does. Now, the interesting thing is, when I start doing the dominant stuff, the chord is actually G minor at this point. So this is a little bit of autopiloting. I'm not really paying attention to the fact that it's G minor right there, because I'm playing B flat dominant on top of G minor, which kind of gives some interesting interactions. Like you get this, when I play that note, that's the flat 7 of B flat. The note that gives it that mildly nasty sound, the note that makes it dominant 7, back a whole step from the root. But what is that over the actual chord that's happening at that moment? It's actually flat 2, right? Because that note is A flat. If we play A flat on top of G minor, it's that. So I'm kind of getting that sound when I do this, but your ears don't really necessarily hear that Instead, in that moment, because the lick I'm playing is such an established, like B flat dominant type lick, your ears are hearing that. You're not necessarily hearing like flat 2 of G minor, because that'd be kind of strong. You're not really hearing that. You're more just hearing the lick, right? And that's usually what autopiloting is. You're not necessarily hearing or paying attention to each individual note and how it functions over the chord. You're more just listening to the melodies and licks themselves, not necessarily how they're functioning over everything. That's kind of what the autopilot style of play will elicit. So that's that moment. See if I can play all of that right from here. Minor pentatonic. Dipping into that dominant. All B flat. That just sounds like one big long B flat chord, right? Even though at the end there, all of that is actually over G minor, the second chord of the progression, like I said. Next moment, nothing crazy to talk about there. I'm just literally thinking of a B flat chord. 5, 1, 2, passing 3, 5, 1. Just literally B flat major right there, nothing crazy. Then after all of that, I land on this A right here. So let me play kind of all of that in context so you can hear it after that B flat lick. So hear this note. This note probably sounds pretty strong to you considering where we just came from. And what did we just do in the previous section? We were playing what? B flat minor or B flat dominant 7, right, in our lead. Both of those sounds have this note, A flat, right? That's that flat 7, one of those nasty notes. Now we're playing A natural. Right? So that note can stand out kind of weirdly if you're not hearing it in context. And there's a reason why I'm playing that note, because of the chord we're playing at this moment. We have now just finally hit the F chord, the 5 chord of the progression. And what note is this? That A is the 7 of the key, 7 of B flat, but it's the 3rd of F major. So it's just a plain chord tone right there. This is an example, of course, of me targeting chord tones. I'm not autopiloting right here. I'm choosing that note because I know the chord that's happening right there. And in this case, that chord is F. So then I start to play just a little bit of basic F major stuff. I kind of play some of those little outer string notes, almost thinking about this little triad right here, that 5, 1, 3 F major. I kind of do... just kind of playing around the sound a little bit. But then I dip into another sound. I'll show you this real fast. So what am I kind of playing right there? It kind of feels like I'm playing like that. What is this sound right here? This is actually, if you look at it, a C minor chord. This is flat 3, 5, 1 of C minor. You can kind of see it on the bottom 3 strings of this chord. Why would I be doing that? This is a very common tactic to use over a standard dominant 7th sound. This is the idea. You're playing a dominant 7th chord, just how it would naturally exist in the key on the 5 chord, where they always are. In this case, that would be F. What you do is you look at the root, you go up a power chord. So on the 5th, look up a 5th. Whatever note that is, you play that note minor. You play that chord minor. This is a C right now. So over the F dominant, right, just the F7 of the key, the 5 chord of the key, I'm actually going to play C minor on top of this, right? So we can break that down even further. If you're in a key, right, this is our key, and you're playing over the 5 chord, you can instead, in your lead, play the 2 chord, minor, right? Minor 6, that's the sound of the 2 chord. So again, that chord's not happening. This chord is happening, but in my lead, I am playing this. And what happens when you do that? What happens when you play C minor on top of an F major chord? You get this, which I'm sure many of you already play this, right? What is this? This is like an F dominant 9 chord, or F9, right? You hear these chords all the time. But if you actually look at what this is an F chord, right? I'm just playing root and 3rd, F major, 1, 3, and then the entirety of a C minor chord on top, right? Of F, right? If I'm looking at F as my root, this is 1, 3, flat 7, 2, and 5. By the way, that's why it's called a 9 chord, because it has a 2 in it. 9 and 2 are the same thing, just numerically like an octave apart, but they're the same actual note. It's G in both situations, right? You can look at it like that, but what is this shape right here? This is really just C minor, flat 3, 5, and 1. It's the bottom 3 strings of this normal bar chord. So whenever you use this tactic, right, you're looking at a root, that chord, and you know that chord's dominant, look up a 5th, up a power chord, and play that minor. And when you do that, you create this. Between your lead and the chord, creates this sort of sound. Or sometimes it can kind of create this too. like a pretty cool, like big suspended sound, which is also really nice, right? And this works for everything. I mean, take a look at any 9 chord you ever play. Like this is D9, totally different chord, not in the key. Look at what I have, right? This is D, F sharp, 1 and 3 of D, and then this is the entirety of an A minor triad on top, right? That's the strategy. This is the dominant chord that we're playing. Go up a fifth, A, and you play minor on top of that. Minor arpeggio, minor pentatonic, and it will always create this kind of thicker dominant sound, sometimes suspended, depending on what you're doing. That's kind of what I'm doing right here. It's a really nice sound, kind of breaks you away a little bit from the standard kind of dominant 7th flavor. It's a pretty cool flavor. So again, one more time. That's kind of the figure right there. Kind of playing C9 on top of F, or C minor with the 2, C minor, add 9. The names are stupid. It's a minor chord with a 2. That's what I'm doing. On top of F, creates a really cool flavor, right? One of these kind of really nice. So big fan of that for sure. Coming down, kind of just navigating through the key until I get to the next point. Now, notice that sound. There's some things going on here that maybe are not 100% in the key, but what does that sound like to you? Okay, if I just do that last little passage, just this. Turn up a little bit. Doesn't that kind of sound like maybe D major, like a transitional dominant chord? Right? Or even closer, it kind of sounds like this. Right? What am I doing right here? What I'm actually thinking about, I'm thinking, implying in my lead D7, a dominant 7th not in the key, because it's functioning as what? The 5 of G minor. That's a sound we've heard all the time. I've actually talked about this. I've talked about this many times throughout the Patreon and on the YouTube, but that is what this sound is, right? I'm playing, moving up basically D7, 3, 5, flat 7, flat 2, 1, right? And this is the sound of that major 3 chord, right? There's tons of stuff on the Patreon and the YouTube about this. Why do I call it that? Because we're in the key of B flat, and I'm playing the 3 chord, 1, 2, 3, D major, right? And what sound lives inside of here? That's where dominant comes from, this dominant flat 6, dominant flat 2. It's where diminished 7 comes from. All of this stuff lives inside of that. That's kind of what I'm playing right here. And I just resolve to G minor how you naturally would. Like there's nothing weird about that lick at all. It's pretty typical. But here's the interesting thing. What's the chord at this moment? It's actually not G minor. The chord at this moment is actually E flat major. So I do all of that stuff on top of F, resolve to G, even though the chord is not G, it's E flat. So why would I do that? Because I know E flat is a 4 chord, and a very common tactic that people do is they play the 6 chord on top of the 4 chord. So that's what I'm doing. I'm actually thinking in my mind, I'm heading to the 6 chord, G minor, because I know I can play G minor on top of E flat major. If I played G minor pentatonic on top of E flat, we talked about that earlier. That's playing B flat major pentatonic on E flat. Right? The major pentatonic on the 1 chord, also the minor pentatonic of the 6 chord on top of the 4 chord. That's a tactic that we've already talked about, and many people do. I'm just planning ahead for that. So I'm actually playing this chord, this kind of transitional dominant 7 chord that's taking me into the 6 chord. That's very common in of itself, even though the 6 chord's not actually happening, right? Because I know I can play this sound on top of the actual chord. I can prepare your ears like that. And it just gives me some really cool stuff to do, right? It's a nice tactic. It's like implying a progression that's not happening. I do it all the time. I've been kind of doing it throughout the solo. So that's a nice figure right there. After that, I kind of start playing kind of E flat, the actual chord. I kind of do these, holding some nice chords, right? All of these notes function in one way or another over E flat. So the first one, right? E flat's the actual root right there. I'm playing, this is G, D, C. So over E flat, that would be 3, 7, 6. Such a great sound. Might as well just hold that chord. It's really cool. Then I play this. It's about as 4 chord sounding as possible. That's 1, 5, sharp 4 of E flat. Remember, E flat is the 4 chord in this key. That's why I can choose all these sounds, and they sound perfectly normal. Then I play this. That's 5, 2, 1 of E flat. Kind of a suspended sound, right? Pretty typical. So the whole thing over E flat, all of these sounds, I'll try to play them all. Really cool. Next one. Final one. Right. And I'm just playing them, kind of holding them, right? Trying to shake the neck. This would be a perfect time for a whammy bar. Right? So one of these days, maybe I'll do that. Right? Maybe just shake the chord like that. That works. And then I finish it like this. One more time. So I kind of keep that like chordiness holding the notes together. I keep that theme going, but into B flat, because I know B flat is happening right at the tail end of this E flat. We start the progression over and back on the B flat chord, and that's what this is. So B flat, if that's our root, we kind of play, that's 1. If we're looking at that note as 1, 7, 1, 6, 5. So we end on this pretty simple chord, just 1, 7, 1, 5, right? And I'm kind of targeting notes, thinking about the chords as I'm playing them. So yeah, this part is definitely the most like harmonically complex of all the sections, but that's basically it. So I'll play all the moments coming from that minor 4 slowly, and you kind of hear what it sounds like over the chords. So from the minor 4, all the minor stuff, a little bit of dominant. Now again, this stuff right here, that kind of pretending a chord progression that's not happening, again, that's going to be a sort of out sound. I'm playing this note. That note is not in the key. It's going to have a moderate clash with the chord that is happening, because what's the chord happening? F. I'm playing F sharp, right? So again, it's not really going to be for everyone, but I personally really like these sounds, these kind of, playing chords that pull your ear in an interesting way. But it's important to note that I'm not just throwing that note in for fun. I'm using this as a very specific sound. Like I'm really thinking D7 right here, or really like the connected diminished 7 or whatever. And I'm really thinking moving to G minor, even though I know the chord progression is not that. Right, so that's how I like to approach these things, trying to bring out these strong notes that are not in the key, but having a purpose for them, because then it always flows a little bit better when you approach it like that. All right, so this last section is going to have all the fast, flashy stuff, but it actually is relatively straightforward when it comes to the note choice and stuff. I'm basically just following the chord changes for the most part. So we just came from this. That's that little chord lick that takes us back to the beginning of the progression into B flat. And I do this first run that sounds like this. So that is very simple, just D minor 7 arpeggio. Right? From the beginning, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 5. And in my own teaching, I would call this left shape, and then center shape on top, just little arpeggio figures. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, I thought the chord was B flat. Why are we playing D minor on top of B flat? It's the same concept as I just did. Previously, the chord was E flat, and what was I sort of implying on top of this chord? G minor. So what's the tactic? The chord is major. I am playing up 2 whole steps, minor. Minor pentatonic, minor arpeggio, something simple, not the full minor scale, because that wouldn't give you the unique sounds. A simple sound, pentatonic, arpeggio, or something. What am I doing here? The actual chord's B flat. I'm going up 2 whole steps, which would be D in this case, and playing that minor. The same exact thing, I'm just now doing it on the 1 chord. I was doing it on the 4 chord earlier. Now I'm doing it on the 1 chord. Now, what sound does this give you? If I look at the notes of D minor pentatonic, what I'm actually really playing up here, that would be 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, or D, F, G, A, and C. What would these notes be over B flat, the actual chord chord in the track. This would be 3, 5, 6, 7, and 2. So notice the sound we get. If I sing it over the chord, bum, 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 we get all these interesting, first of all, we get some pretty normal notes. We get D and F. That's 3 and 5 of B flat. But then we get 6, 7, and 2. So we get these really kind of thick major 7 type chords, right? But notice what note we don't have. I never played a B flat in there, right? D minor pentatonic does not have a B flat, which is perfect because a common sound that people will go for when playing major 7, like B flat major 7, if that's the sound you're going for, is to not play the root in your lead. Because when you play the root, that will clash with what note? The 7. The note that is now, the featured color of the chord. Like if I play this chord and sing the root, right, it's going to clash with this. So most people just choose to not really play the root. They will play the root, but not sit on it. They'll use it in passing, something like that, right? I still played B flat, but I didn't really sit on it. I used it to get to here, right? The actual 7 of the chord. So instead of thinking of all that, you can just say, I'm going to play B flat major 7 in my lead by simply looking at B flat, going up 2 whole steps, and playing minor pentatonic. Right? That's the easiest way to do that, and that's essentially what I'm doing right here, going for that B flat major 7 sort of sound. That's the lick. Right? Then when I get to the top, I start a little kind of descending, a little sweep picking pattern. Get it correctly. That would be simply of B flat, still thinking B flat. You can kind of even see the little chord shape that I'm implying right there. That would be 7, 5, 3, 2, 1. Very simple B flat major 7. Doesn't get more obvious than that. Then I'm coming down G suspended, a sound I really love, which can be played on top of B flat because the entirety of this G suspended sound lives inside G minor, and G minor is the relative minor of B flat. They all kind of overlap, so I can easily do that. Then I come down one more, and that one's just straight up B flat major pentatonic, 1, 6, 5, 3, but I end on 2 right here, this C. Why would I do that? Then I continue with some more stuff, because the chord has changed at this moment. The moment I land here, bam, that note locks in with the G minor chord, the next chord of the progression. And what is C on top of G minor? If I sing that, that would be G's 1, 2, 3, 4. One of my favorite sounds, a minor chord with a 4 in it. This sort of sound. Really, really nice. Huge fan of that sound. I'll sing it one more time. Yeah, it's a great sound. So I like that, so I'm landing on it. And that's just kind of G minor pentatonic, nothing really interesting there. So after that, I start another, like kind of the beginning of this long stretch of runs that I'm playing. And this sound is actually kind of the same thing, G minor with a lot of its 4s. So you're going to see a lot of C in this passage. So it's also a right hand kind of picking pattern. The pattern would be pick, hammer on, middle finger, ring finger, hammer on. So pick, hammer on, middle, ring, hammer on. That's what I'd be doing. Next set of strings. Next set of strings. Very, very common, very easy to play, 5-note pattern, so it's kind of this odd note grouping, which is kind of cool. And the structure that I'm playing, if you might look at it, kind of looks like I'm playing G minor pentatonic or minor 7, so 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 1. That's the normal figure. Everyone watching this video already can play this. But instead of playing 5, I'm playing 4, right? Excuse me. Why would I be doing that? Because I want to feature this note instead of that note, right? The 4, to give me this sound. I really like it. So I'm also kind of doing that throughout the lick, right? 1, flat 3, 4, flat 7, 1. Next one, 4, 5, flat 7, flat 3, 4. Starting and ending on 4s. Then doing it again. Right, that lick is flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4. There's the 4 again. Then flat 7. Such a great sound. So I'm really, really, really big fan of that sound. And then I kind of go up and down that figure, and then I start the cacophony of noodly licks up top, and they're all kind of similar, just with a little note shift to match the chords. So the first one's this, if I can play it right. Let me turn it up a little bit. So this is, to teach this pattern is a little awkward because it just happens to be a pattern that's comfortable for me. I'm kind of like doubling the top note. and I'm kind of staggering the arpeggio shape. The exact pattern doesn't really matter. I would honestly, if I were you, take this note structure and apply it to whatever picking note flail configuration that is comfortable for you, so you can extract the note material but still do your own thing with it. The note material, I think, is the most important thing. The sound that I'm getting right here, the chord, by the way, has switched. We're off G minor. We're now on F major. So of F major, what are these notes? Because we need to hear these notes on top of F, because that will tell you why they sound the way they do. Over F, that's our root. We can look at this as our little root right there. 3, 4, flat 7, 1, 3. Right? So it's like F dominant with a 4 and a 3. So we're kind of getting this sort of, excuse me. Very cool flavor, dominant with a 4 right there in a lead format. Very cool flavor. You could, if you want to, also kind of look at this like E flat major with a sharp 4. You can kind of look at it like that if you want, which makes sense because that would be the 4 chord, and we're kind of playing that on top of the 5 chord. That's getting into the weeds a little bit, but you could do that if you wanted to. I do that a bunch. And then once the chord changes to actually move to E flat, I then modify the lick slightly to keep the figure going, but just change the notes to match the chords. And the notes I'm changing are this. Again, the notes are A, B flat, E flat, F, A. All I do is I change both A's. So the starting note and the bottom note and the top note. The bottom note A moves down to G. The top note A moves up to B flat. So it turns into this if I play it properly. It's kind of an uncomfortable lick, but that's the shape. Now, how does this work? What's the sound I'm getting here? Remember, the chord is actually E flat now. So what are we playing? G, B flat, E flat, F, B flat. That would be E flats, 3, 5, 1. That's literally just E flat major triad. F, and then B flat. So that's an E flat chord with an F. Or E flat, add 2 or add 9. That's what this is, basically an arpeggio version of that. Very like ethereal, kind of calming, like, running through a field of flowers kind of sound. If I play it properly, that is. And then I'll do it a couple times with that same pattern, and then I just fill out the lower notes of that same exact sound by doing this. Right, so I'm just reaching down, playing F, E flat, B flat. That's just 2, 1, 5 of the same sound. Right, I'm just trying to fill out the sound to get like a larger flourish of it before I finish. Right, and then at the very end, I hold the 4 chord as it like trails off, and I do this sort of passage. And what I'm doing here is right there I'm kind of doing something specific, but I'm mostly just playing these specific figures, not necessarily thinking about the chord tones, because I know this is a 4 chord. 4 chord is the easiest chord in the key to play over. You can just basically do anything you want and it's going to sound good. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm featuring these chords. I really like these shapes. I've been playing them a lot lately. And it kind of looks like this. A note, up a 2nd in the key, up a 6th in the key. So if you did not a chord version, if you did like a little single note version, it would kind of look like that. Like it probably makes more sense to play them like that, but personally I like to do them like this because I can hold all the notes together. I'm just moving through the key with these shapes. I really like that sound, and I know I can do it over the 4 chord. Sounds really cool. And then I do one more tactic. What was that? This final chord, by the way, is just E flat major 7, nothing crazy. But this, what is that? An F major arpeggio. What is this tactic? A tactic that I've already talked about. F is the 5 chord in this key, and I'm playing it on top of the 4 chord. And that creates this, right? This 4 chord, it's normal chord, but with a 6, 2, and crucially, a sharp 4. I can't tell you how common this tactic is, right? If you're doing this kind of like, whatever you want to call this trash can style ending of the solo where it just kind of slowly disintegrates into the final chord, it's kind of the vibe I'm going for. And if you're doing this on a 4 chord, which is a very common chord to do this on, like if you've ever played gospel or something, like modern gospel, they do this all the time. They'll have a big like triumphant 4 chord and licks will just kind of come and sort of dissolve into silence. And a common move that they will do is do this sort of thing. And what am I playing? The chord is E flat, and I'm literally just thinking up a whole step major, and I'm playing that. That's what this move is. It's really, really cool sound. So pretty common. So that's pretty much it. So let me just slowly play all of these if I can remember everything on top of some chords. You can kind of hear everything sounds. I'll try to play them a little slower. From the B flat, as we continue arpeggios. Now we start our G minor. Right, now we're on to F, our flailing licks. Pretty cool. Change the notes to get to the E flat. Fuller version. End on a big E flat. That's that F triad. Let's do it. And we end on the final chord. So yeah, that's basically it. You can see a lot of these tactics I talk about pretty frequently on the Patreon, on the YouTube, all that good stuff. But as long as you think about, the key you're in, the tactics that you can use playing chords on top of other chords, always thinking about the notes that you're playing, how they function over the chords, knowing when you can autopilot, because there's a lot of autopilot opportunity in the solo, like I talked about in the beginning of the video. As long as you keep that stuff in mind and experiment, you could really come up with some pretty cool stuff over this. So hopefully, all of that stuff makes sense. See you in the next one.